Hi, it's Jessi. Today I am drinking nothing. I forgot to grab a drink. Hold that thought. Alright. Now I'm drinking a little bit of vanilla coffee whiskey from Hazard's Distillery. Ooh. Okay, so if you haven't noticed, there is a large gap missing from my favorite shelf right now, and that's because today I'll be reviewing the Memoirs of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. Because I recently was going through my videos, older videos, and realized for some reason I had never reviewed these, and I don't know why. My guess would be because I finished the last book Within the Sanctuary of Wings relatively close to the end of the year, and I got caught up in all my end of year video things and kind of forgot about it. So we're gonna do that now, which means my thoughts aren't as fresh as I would like them to be, but maybe if anything that speaks to how much more honest this review will be, because I still love them half a year later. Half a year and 60 other books later, 70, 80, you know, it keeps counting. So to start with what this series is about, these books follow Lady Trent. This book follow Isabel Trent, who is a dragon naturalist. So when the series, but they're memoirs, so it's her as an older woman looking back and reflecting on her life. So they kind of go through different adventures, different things she studies, different steps she makes in her research. So the first one is mostly her as a young girl and then a young woman, developing her love, finding her passion for dragons, and then eventually breaking into the field of dragon naturalism, and it shows like her first ever expedition. And then each of the following books are her going to different places to study different dragons. So this is her studying a type of like swamp dragon, and this is her at sea. I love The Voyage of the Basilisk is the name for this, because it kind of feels like a riff on The Voyage of the Beagle about, you know, Charles Darwin. So that's fun for me because I'm a nerd. This one is her in the desert. This is her in the desert with dragons, and this is her in like a tundra mountain snowy realm. So it's a little bit of everything. It's really cool. And the way I would best describe this series is if you took Jane from the Disney's Tarzan movie, and this is how I've described it every time I've talked about this. If you took Jane from Disney's Tarzan and you took her out of real England and put her in a fantasy version of England where dragons exist, and instead of studying gorillas, she studies dragons, but she studies them, not her grandfather. That's what That's what Lady Trent is. It is a vaguely Victorian, Elizabethan, I don't know, eras. I think Victorian England, well, Europe, because she travels, and I guess not even just Europe, but like a Victorian era world, but slightly different because dragons exist. And dragons in these worlds aren't like mysterious, hidden, mystical creatures. They're literally like everyday animals, to the fact where like some of them are even considered like a nuisance. And it's just wonderful. So let's get into my breakdown of what's got what score. My lights aren't on. All right, we'll get into what got what score for my ranking system here and talk a little bit about why, and we'll get into it. So the first thing here, characters. The most important thing in my opinion to any good story is good characters that show good growth and good motivation. And for this, I have to give the characters a 10 out of 10. So obviously we have Lady Trent herself, and she shows remarkable growth from book 1 to book 5, like insane growth. But there's all sorts of other characters. So the main ones in the first book that you encounter are, oh gosh, I'm forgetting names. There is the man funding her expedition. There's her kind of almost like rival in it that's also on the expedition with her, and another young gentleman on the expedition with her. That's what I'll say to avoid spoiling anything. And all 4 of those people have so much depth in this first one. And then the cast just keeps growing. There are 2 more people that become, 3 more people that become kind of characters throughout the rest of the series that are just they all have their own motivations, but they're all intensely interested in science in some degree or another, whether they're more interested in engineering or more interested in biology, or they're just all fantastically motivated. One of the main kind of conflicts that comes up is Isabel's restrictions based on her sex versus others' restriction based on their class. And I really love that conflict that's set up between these characters and how that contributes to things. So the characters, I fell in love with them. I don't know how you couldn't fall in love with Isabella, like how you could read these books and not be like, wow, she's great, she's my hero. She's fantastic. For the plot, on the other hand, I kind of went a little bit lower, not much lower, with an 8 out of 10. The thing with these books is they are written to be memoirs, and very realistically so. So you miss a lot of details because she'll jump from one event to another. And sometimes that feels like things are missing, but it also makes it feel sometimes like things just kind of happen. You kind of like, it gets a little meandering. Part of that, and I'll talk about this when I get to the ending, the 5th book was a little disappointing for me, and I think that's part of why the plot came down, because obviously all the books are leading up to where this is getting to. But I think that would be one of the weaker elements for me, is the plot, because it's a little more meandering, because you miss parts. But I think it ends up working because of the style. It fits the style, so it almost is a good thing. The setting was a 9 out of 10, and the only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because it's basically fantasy England. And I would give it that 10 out of 10 if it weren't. And the fact that it's getting 9 out of 10 when it is basically just our world, but with dragons, is pretty impressive in my mind. And now, granted, there's all sorts of things that change. I feel like there was something else that bugged me about the setting, and maybe it's because I don't necessarily love the way different cultures are explored in these books. Because she does travel, like in this one, she travels to what could be considered maybe Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, maybe, if I had to put a name to where she goes in this one. Or this one, when she's in the swamps, would be, I don't know what this would be comparable to in the real world. And I think sometimes those cultures don't get, they're a little almost stereotypical, but then other times they're not. They're fantastic. There is, in particular, in Voyage of the Basilisk, I'm trying to find every excuse I can to hold up all of these covers because they're gorgeous, but in Voyage of the Basilisk in particular, there's a specific group of people they meet. I love their culture so much. So it's not perfect, but overall I really enjoyed it. And like I said, for it being a fantasy real world, not, its own world, but basically our world but fantasy, that's a really high rating for me to give it. So going on to the general appeal for this, which is the most subjective of all of these, because it's just, hey, what do I think? And if it's not obvious, it's a 10 out of 10. I adore these books so much. I want to reread them maybe soon. I really want to get into the spin-off series, but we're not getting into that right now. So that's a 10 out of 10. And moving on to the writing, I also gave a 10 out of 10. I have read some of Marie Brennan's other works, and trust me, she's a sweetheart. I finally got to meet her at JordanCon, and she's just darling. But I've read a little bit of her other stuff, and the writing did not stand out to me nearly as well. But what makes this so brilliant is because it says Memoirs of Lady Trent, and they really do feel that way. And I give her props for that. And there's definitely some very witty moments. I don't think I was annotating books at the time I read these, no. Although I will. One of the things, I'm going to put this in with writing style just because it's when I remembered it, is there's these sketches throughout. Now that one's just of a town, so that one's like whatever, but let me find a good dragon picture. Like throughout, there's just these beautiful, her sketches of dragons, because she talks about in the first one how that's kind of how to start out what she had to do, because sketching is something that was accepted for women to do. Anyway. Writing was great. Going on the originality, I gave this a 9 out of 10, and I'm not really sure why anymore. It's definitely not something I've ever read anything remotely like before, so I feel like it should be a 10 out of 10, and maybe it was a little bit of that setting element coming back in, of that she could have done more to make her setting a little more unique. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure why this got 9 out of 10 instead of 10 out of 10, but it's really just, I've never read anything like it. Like, to the point where I would almost recommend this series for people that are fans of literary fiction before I recommend it to fantasy fans. Like, yes, it has dragons, but it's not fantasy in the way you think of fantasy, which is just, I love. And then the ending I gave 10 out of 10, and this is another one that confuses me a little bit, because the final book within the Sanctuary of Wings did some weird things I didn't like. But I'm trying to remember the final moments of this, because I think there was just something in the way she wrapped everything up that I really, really loved, where the ending for all of the characters felt right. But I don't really remember, because again, this has been a while. Oh no, I didn't do my spoiler warning for the ending. I don't think it matters, because I'm not really saying any details, but I don't remember what that one is, and that's why doing this review is really making me want to reread them. But that brings me to the end of this. So what was the total score for this? When everything was calculated up, it came to a 9.4 out of 10, which would, in half, why didn't I write down what half of that was? It would be a 4.7, I think. Yeah, 4.7 out of 5, if you prefer that, if that makes more sense for you. But in any case, it's brilliant. I really do love these books. They became one of my favorite series last year, because they're just amazing. I keep reading more of Marie Brennan's works, but none of them have quite felt as wonderful as these ones. I know she has another series that she lists in here, which I haven't checked out. And she's writing another series as part of a duology, or not part of a duology, part of a duo. Her and another author are working with a name. And if I can remember what it is, I'll include a picture here, but if you check her website, it's there. Which I think is something to do with like a traveling stage group. I don't remember, but it's got a beautiful mask on it. It's like maybe the Mask in the Mirror, or Mask of Mirrors, or something. Anyway, which I do want to read, and I really want to read the spin-off series, and I don't know if that'll be listed in this one is what that is. No, it's not. There is a spin-off series that's about, I believe, Isabel's granddaughter, I think, or maybe great-granddaughter or something, but that I really do want to read, because I just want to live in this world a little longer. Anyway, I don't know how helpful that review was, given that I could barely remember half the stuff other than how much I loved it, so it felt like a lot of gushing. But I really hope, let me see if I can pick these back up, I have maybe inspired you to pick up these books and give them a shot, because I think they're wonderful and they deserve so much more love and affection from the reading community at large, not even just like the fantasy community. Not even just the fantasy community. I really feel like there's something in here for everyone. Romance, there's a really great romance in here. So just, I would recommend them, and I hope you enjoyed this video.